Today we'll be talking about why our perception of sex matters. This is our primary focus at True Connections Pornography Recovery because this is the way we see everyone heal, is by changing their perception of sex to see sex in a more healthy way. We're hoping that this can inspire you to focus on this in your home. How can I help my children to perceive sex in a healthy way?
Welcome to Fostering Godlike Sexuality at Home. Our goal here is to empower parents to teach their children to see sex in a godlike way.
My name is Brigham Elton. I'm a pornography and sexual addiction counselor who've helped thousands of people overcome even the appeal of pornography. And I'm hoping to get out in front of this and try to help parents to set up their homes to chase godlike sexuality from the beginning.
My name's Andrea, a mother of 4, and I'm learning alongside all you listeners and excited to have these discussions. Thanks for joining us.
In my practice at True Connections Pornography Recovery, I really do see a wide mix of different sexual issues, right? I would say, honestly, at the beginning it was 80, but now it's almost down to 40. 40% of people I see are coming to me because, they struggle with pornography.
Okay.
But I get a significant amount of individuals that are coming to me because of sexual abuse. That's probably 20 to 30% of the people I see. And then I see people because they have this, sexual fear. And because they have this sexual fear that, sex is bad or whatever, they're having a hard time sexually engaging with their partner, both men and women, right? It's a little more common for women, but for men as well. And then I also am seeing people because of infidelity in their partnership, And independent of why someone comes to me, the healing process is to begin to see sex in the way that God does. Because if we thought about sex in the way that God thought about sex, we would feel about sex in such a positive way that the sexual fear wouldn't stop us. And our sexual behaviors would start to mimic our God, right? And so as all these individuals come through, right, our focus really becomes what is God's perspective of sex? Because if you can understand and then start to obtain that, healing will actually happen.
So do you want to give us a little bit details about how some of these things you've talked about, whether it's infidelity, pornography use, fear of sex, or trauma from sexual abuse, how those things are evidence of a shift away from God's view of sex?
Totally, yeah. Let's start with pornography. Just because I think this is common for all of us, independent if you're a pornography addict or whatever, our media has shaped our sexual perceptions for every human, and pornography is just sexualized media that ends up getting used for a high, right? So pornography has shifted us. It's in such a significant way that there is multiple studies. I can think of 8 different studies that have shown that over 30% and somewhere between 30 and 50, right? And the recent ones I've seen are 47% of men between the ages of 15 and 35 are struggling to get an erection to actual sex because their brain has been so skewed by pornography. Some of the ways it's skewing our perception of sex. One is just this constant access.
Yeah.
Instead of sex being something that we build, chase, then eventually connect with someone.
Yeah.
Now it's this I'm bored, boom, here's a high, feel a little bit better, right? And then it's over.
Okay.
Right? And they're starting to become this mindset that that's easier. People are starting to choose to masturbate or use porn instead of have sex with their partner because it's easier to get that high on your own, just like that.
So then that view that sex is about high versus it's about a connection or an opportunity to create a relationship.
Another way that pornography does that is this real sex is very patternistic. It follows the same kind of flow. It's not constantly new, shocking, thrilling. It's this I feel close to you. This is a shared us experience. Again, sex is connection, right? Where because pornography, Pornhub, for example, put 169 years of new footage just in 2019. It's so constantly new, shocking, thrilling that individuals use pornography they use TikTok or Instagram Reels, where it's 15 to 60 seconds, new video. In Utah, individuals average about 8 minutes on a pornography website and are almost hitting 11 clips. And so it's just new. And it's so new, shocking, thrilling that they're getting a high from that. Right? Yeah. And they're starting to believe sex is new. Sex is always shocking. It's thrilling. It's this kind of feeling instead of this build up of connection that's happening in a life.
That has some like patterns to it, some safety in the exploration of it. Like,
okay. Exactly. Right. Another way that is kind of shifting it is just like the way that someone uses, right? Like this constant new high be done, right? That's on this like 8-minute cycle is not really what sex is like, right? Like, sure, maybe your sexual intimacy itself is 15 to 20 minutes, you know, but like there's this pattern of building, there's an us connection, there's relationship, right? Like old pornography films back in like the 80s and 90s, like they would tell the stories. Now, sometimes they were terrible stories about affairs or they were stories about bachelorette parties, but they still were these stories of humans connecting and then choosing to be sexual.
And that kind of supported the idea that sex needs a story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally. And now we're to this point where like sex and a story don't even always line up.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if we're looking at more like the female media lane, you know, like it's also skewing someone's perception of sex, right? With just this like sex is this magical pinnacle moment that like it's everything you've ever been waiting for, magic and rainbows, whatever.
Yeah. So it's the kind of the skewing of what the story looks like.
Yeah.
Even if there is still a story in it. Okay.
Right. And so like these are just evidences that someone's perception of sex has been skewed.
Yeah.
Right. And it usually skews it to the point and then mixed with hiding. Right. And so like now it's like its own thing. There's like porn over here and sex over here. Like it's gotten so skewed that it almost like they try to in their head go like, okay, this is porn. Right. And now this is sex. Yeah.
Okay.
And like that separation can exist for a little while in someone's brain where they're like, oh, this is porn. I know it's not real, but it's porn. But then eventually that starts to fade and decay because they're having so much experience with pornography that like it overpowers their perception of what real sex is in their head.
Yeah. That pull of something that doesn't require the work and the effort and like the commitment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And so someone comes and they show up in my office most of the time and their perception of sex is so skewed, it's supporting them using pornography consistently, right? Because like, this is what it is. This is what it is. And right, it's not against their belief system. They're not getting this like feeling anymore. It's like, oh yeah, this is it. And they get excited when they think about it. And they start to believe that they can't control themselves.
Yeah.
Which is a little true because like their view of sex, which they're choosing all day, is supporting this mindset.
Their behavior. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like their behavior fits their thought patterns.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're going to use.
Yeah.
I totally get that. Right. But if someone comes to my office and like, I tell them that like, hey, we're going to try to think about sex in God's way. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. You know, but then as we really
like, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then as we really like sit down and go to specific things like, okay, how do you believe God handles a sexual thought? You know, and they're like, oh my gosh, God has sexual thought, you know?
Yeah.
And it starts, and then that like, oh, like this is real. Like sex is a godly thing. Because at this point, their view of sex has decayed so much that to put God and sex in the same sentence is uncomfortable for them.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're like, oh, with it, right?
Yeah.
Which is an evidence of how far they've shifted. But that starts to change as they learn about sex in a godlike way. Learn. And that becomes our focus for the first little bit. And that learning starts to make them start to say, yeah, they start to say God like sex or sex and God, or like that I can become God, I can have sex and be godly at the same time, right? And they start to show that belief system, and honestly, this burden starts to lift. Like immediately, you can just see in their posture that like, oh my gosh, like sex is such an amazing, good thing that I have let decay.
Yeah, and like
life.
You see this realign and this shift back towards what it's meant to be and what like their spirit can resonate with in such like a powerful, like you said, confidence building way.
Yeah. And honestly, that's mainly only happening in my office at first. Then they start to have their moments where like they're having their own moments where they'll like see something that is a perversion of God's perception of sex. And their brain is like, ugh. And it immediately is like, something's wrong with this. And that comes back. Because that exists when you're a kid. That's the reason that pornography exposure is such a wow thing. Yeah. Right? But like, it comes back for them where they'll see something, they'll be like, oh, I don't like that. You know, I don't want that. I don't like it. That's like, seems wrong to me.
Yeah, they can see like the decay in that.
Yes, now. Exactly. And so those little moments are evidence of their view of sex becoming like God's. And so those moments start to multiply to eventually, like, I had this kid that texted me a couple weeks ago, and he chose to use pornography. And as he chose to use, he was there looking at the video, and he saw that like 4.2 million people had seen it, and his brain immediately is like, dude, you're just one of many. This isn't real. This person is not choosing you. And his brain, naturally, because his view of sex had shifted, started pointing out all the fake things about pornography.
So what was once arousing is now no longer arousing.
And he gets this emotional ick. Ugh, right? And then naturally, he's like, he shut it, he put it away, he engaged in something different, and like, he now removed the appeal of pornography. Like, not just overcame, like, okay, I can white knuckle through this, but like, his view of sex was now keeping him safe. Right?
That's powerful healing.
Yeah.
Like, that's remarkable.
To the point where eventually, like, we have kids that, like, pornography is no longer this, like, hey, I could, woohoo, excitement. It's like, yeah, I could, but ugh. You know? This is what we're trying to help parents get to in their homes, right?
Yeah.
Is to like, what if we could start, not from this place of decay, but start from this place of innocence in the child and like keep aiming them at godlike intimacy from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this is not a pornography specific thing.
How does it affect like somebody who comes in with like sexual fear, right? Like they're having a hard time engaging with their partner, or they feel a lot of pressure, or they're just not sure if they should feel good about being sexual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, like the healing process is, the direction is similar, right? We were coming from a different angle, right? Instead of this like sex has decayed into this like get my own high.
Okay.
You know, like for a lot of these individuals, like because of this fear of sex being objectified, they just ended with sexual fear.
So then it's not coming from like this, like sex is like an objectification. Well, no, what did you say before? The first angle that we were coming from?
So the first angle, like we're coming from like someone has used pornography and masturbation to turn sex into something that's about me. It's pretty selfish, right? And like with someone with sexual fear, instead of this like sex is objectification, selfish, get a high. Now it's this like, oh no, it's going to get me. Am I enough? Kind of bad. Shouldn't mindset.
Okay.
Right?
Like,
and
I don't know if this is a good part of me.
Yeah, exactly. And that fear is really hard to deal with, right? Because it's hard for someone to engage sexually, particularly women to engage sexually, when they're in a state of fear.
Right.
Right? Because like when a woman starts to feel aroused, her body first goes to, am I safe?
Yeah.
And if they're feeling fear, then they're thinking, no, I'm not safe, right? And so it's really hard for someone to be a real sexual participant and be able to feel the like spiritual high, emotional high, and physical high that comes from sex.
So like the body can go through the motions, but like you're not getting the actual godly sexual experience that we're aiming at. So you're kind of saying like, no matter what angle we start from, we are aiming towards the same thing.
Yeah.
So teaching and focusing on where we're trying to get is healing in both spaces.
Exactly. Right. Like I watch individuals here that like engage with God's view of sex, and like I'll even have clients who've like said to me, right, that I'm like, okay, like, do you believe God is eternal? And all of a sudden you see them just go, oh,
yeah.
What? Well, and honestly, one time I watched the wife go, ugh, and I watched the husband go, I hope not. And
Did you mean,
said it out loud.
Is sex eternal?
Yeah, is sex eternal? What did I say?
You said, is God eternal?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, is sex eternal? Yeah. And so they were just like, there was just this dread that sex was going to continue after this life, right? Which is such an evidence of this, like, fear of sexual desire.
Yeah, and what the dynamic is for, like, both of their perspectives, like what they're carrying.
Totally. But as they started to like wrap their heads around it, and honestly very quickly, I watched in like 3 or 4 weeks there, just their like connection jumped. They started sitting close together. They touch each other more. They're just like, their intimacy increased so significantly. They would tell me about it consistently, right? And it was just this growth that came as they were able to like, oh, when I feel sexual desire, that's a godly feeling.
Yeah.
This is like a charitable feeling. This is a selfless feeling. This is a good thing.
This isn't like a hurdle in our relationship. This isn't like a burden in our relationship. This isn't like a point of conflict. This is an opportunity for closer connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And just more evidence that, like, again, no matter which direction we're coming at, like, our goal is to become godly.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, as a parent in my home, whether it's my, I don't have any boys, but if it's a son or a daughter or whoever, Like the real healing comes as we can focus on godliness,
Yeah.
right? Instead of like just trying to address little issues.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about how like it shows up for like sexual abuse and kind of trauma?
Yeah, sexual abuse it's a very similar one to this like fear. Sexual abuse typically goes in one or two directions. One is this like fear. Like I get in a sexual situation and it's like, oh no, am I safe? I get clenchy. It's like, oh no, what's happening? And there's a lot of anxiety and it's fear. Or I see it move towards this like, my worth is only my sexual worth. And like that terrible moment that happened to them shifts their perspective of self.
Okay.
Right. And either way, like we're still trying to like, if we could see, think about, and feel sexually the way that God does, like all of that would go away.
Yeah.
Right. And I watch people overcome sexual fear, and I watch people go like, okay, like sex is part of me, but it isn't all of me. Right. And that becomes even more and more true as they start to have sexual experiences that aren't just physical.
Okay. So like for this, like instances of trauma, we're kind of going from like, here's my reaction, my instant reaction because of my traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
But now I can actually take control and shift that perspective and choose how I'm going to engage and think about sex in a godly way.
Totally. Now that takes some skill and it's hard and it takes practice. But yes, over time, like individuals are able to shift the way that they think about sex and the way that even what their brain has stored sexually, that can be changed.
Can create something new for that space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Exactly. And like, so no matter what, like no matter who you are, and even me, like I've been consistently working on my perception of sex for at least 40 hours for like over a decade, you know? And like, I'm not there. And yet for me, like it's a chase of God-like sexuality. And I'm excited to like join you in that chase, to join our listeners in that chase.
Yeah.
I join my wife in that chase. With my kids, I'm taking them on that chase with me. Every client that comes in here, we're like, hey, we're going up this mountain together, you know, because all of us can chase that together, which is so unifying. Instead of like, hey kids, get your crap together like me. It's like, let's go on this journey together.
Okay. I love that. That's so empowering to hear, like, that you can recognize where you're at is a chase, and that it's not like an arrival moment.
Totally. Yeah, totally. We will forever be chasing a godlike perspective of sex. But as that is our goal, like healing is found, happiness is found, and like new realms of connection are found.
Cool. Thanks for joining us for this discussion today. We hope it was valuable for you and your families. Our website, trueconnectionsrecovery.com, has a bunch of resources that you can access to get support from us.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways we're trying to help individuals, right? Whether it's through like individual recovery, like partner support, even like parental support, like how can I set my home up as a place for success?
Yep. We will be putting like technology management resources, other educational tools, or like workshops that might be up and coming in the area. Just
trying to provide ways for like families to feel supported, right? And so all of that you can find there on that website.
The more that this gets shared, and like as you talk about it with others that you know, like the discussions kind of flow, and we can all grow in this area together.
Yeah, we really succeed as a community.
Yep.
Thank you.